start. Okay, let me go pause the music.
All right, welcome everyone. We're about to start this conversation. If y'all want to join us, I'm gonna pause the music. So, welcome everybody. Farron Manuel here, curator of the space and director of the Black Art in America Foundation. We're here today with Grace Kisa, multidisciplinary artist, muse, world traveler. And but before we get started, I want to introduce Chris Swain with East Point, handling public art. Kind of tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Okay, good afternoon. First, let me begin by the land acknowledgement. Acknowledge today that we stand on the land of the Muskogee Creek Indians, today known as East Point, Georgia. That being done, I want to say welcome. And we are so honored to have Black Art in America in the city of East Point. This has really changed the landscape of our city. For me personally, as an arts advocate, I've enjoyed arts for many years, but it's so hard to teach other people that. So for me to have Najee to choose East Point as a location to move here, it gives a visual reference to all the things I've talked about for years. So now people come to me and say, Chris, what's that place on the art around? I'm like, stop, go inside, talk to them, buy something. That's what it's all about. So with that, I have the joy of, like I said, being a public arts director, which really to me is not a job because I love art so much. So we have all these wonderful rich murals we've introduced to the city thanks to Fabian and the ladies from Living Walls have a mural of Passage O'Hillier, which is the first Black mayor in the state of Georgia. A lot of people think it's Shirley Franklin, but anyway, welcome to East Point. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your time here, and come back and see us this summer. We're gonna have a lot of programming in the city. We're gonna have some house music programs going on this summer. We do a drag show in June. We do Day of the Dead. We try to celebrate, we touch everybody. Because that's the thing about it, for me having this job, though my skin is brown, I have to show them I can see everybody. You know, so, and it's important to have everybody, including all of you, to come out and support us when we have these events. So once again, welcome to East Point. Don't let us be your last time coming out here.
All right. So, here with Grace, I say to start off, I'll just kind of point out a couple of Grace's works in the gallery. So this woodblock print behind you all, and also these two sculptural pieces here are Grace's work. We're happy to have her work here in the show, and she's just a real talent and has the ability to work in several different mediums, which a lot of artists kind of find a thing that they stick with, which is okay also. But I'm always excited to talk about different processes with artists who have a very versatile skill set. So Grace, could you tell us a little bit about how you got into art making and your training, and also your move to Atlanta to attend an art institute?
Okay. My name is Grace Kisa, and like Farron said, I'm a visual artist based here in Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, in East Africa. And the first time I left Kenya, I was 8 years old. But as an artist, I started in nursery school. So growing up, my dad used to interview us as little kids in our mother tongue. And then once I started going to school in English, he would be speaking to us in Luya, which is my tribal language. And he would interview us about just what you want to do, who you are. Once I started going to school, starting to add English into the interview, and he asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I said, I want to write pictures, because I didn't know what the word was or make art. But I knew, I was probably 4 years old, and that was the recording. So I still have that recording. It was done on a reel-to-reel. And then my dad transferred it to cassette. My partner, my husband, who's also an artist, and an audiophile, found an old reel-to-reel, transferred it onto CD. So I still have the recording of those interviews that were done in the early 70s. Me and my sisters just talking, just talking about life as we saw it as children. So I started at for your question. I started around 4, but I always did art all the way through elementary school, middle school, high school. We eventually moved to McLean, Virginia in 1978. So art was part of my therapy, the way I interpreted the world, the way I interpreted each move, because we moved from country to country because of my dad's work. And so those experiences are incorporated in my work, in themes of adaptation, migration, how one acculturates to the environment, each environment that you bring, what you take away, what you bring, and then that is also represented in the different mediums that I use.
Now, talking about writing pictures, that's a very interesting approach, an interesting way to describe making art. You know, for a long time, I've considered, you know, some artists as really great philosophers and storytellers and truth tellers. And so, with the piece behind you here, what are you writing with, you know, this body of work?
So what I'm writing with, again, I told you about the different materials. So it's like picking up pieces from the different places that I go to create something new. So each time I'm transformed by each move, the way all these different elements in this piece work, or that piece, which is a guitar piece. I repurpose a lot of found objects. Sometimes they're donated to me, or sometimes I will just walk up and down the aisle at Home Depot and see interesting things, not worried about what they were meant for, but what they look like. And then, so I have a lot of junk. So what I do is, I'm not going to bring in any more. So what I do is just start playing by putting them together and see if they speak to me. So if I find that guitar, I've always thought that the shape looked like a human body. So if you cut off the neck, even if you left the neck on, the first curves look like shoulders, inward looks like a waist, the outside looks like hips. And so to go from there is really easy. So I use the spindles from a stair rail for the legs, shoe stretchers for the feet, and then I made the arms out of wood. I cast the heads out of resin. So I make a clay mold first, cast it, make a mold of it, cast it in resin. And the versatility of resin is that it allows me to color it in different ways. This head and hand were made out of clay, so I modeled them out of clay. And I was able to put in the expression using color and paint to change or to add depth to the personality of the piece. So when I was talking about putting the pieces together, making them make sense, and then going beyond that to design things.
Okay. And I'm thinking, and so now I'm just kind of thinking about your works that I've seen. I'm trying to kind of do a reading of, you know, what places inspired you. So like even in the print here, Balance of Power, is this a reference to growing up in Kenya? Or?
It is. You can see it in Kenya. You can see it all over the continent. You can see it in the Central America and South America, Mexico, but where women are harvesting fruit, taking them to market, building an economy. So most of the market women are business women. So they are creating an industry which serves the community, and then they can educate their children, build their houses, build their churches, schools, communities. So the balance of power is a double entendre because she's balancing the bananas on her head, and then with the power of economy, which she represents. So yes, definitely, from Kenya.
Now, I was unaware that you were also a printmaker until we had the Atlanta Fine Art Print Fair. I was more familiar with the sculptural pieces that you've done, and also you know, like other projects that involve some elements of photography, and also Maurice's work. And we we've touched base before through Arcadia
Yes.
when we did the
Okay,
review.
that's right.
But I think the printmaking is remarkable,
Thank
and
you.
I'm really happy that you know, I had the chance to see this work and have it as a part of the print fair, and we had a lot of success with even some new collectors getting access to your work. Could you tell us a bit about you know, your experience with printmaking?
Okay, again, printmaking goes back to elementary school. So, growing up in Fairfax County, they have an excellent art department. Fairfax County Public Schools always had art. And so that's where we first did our first printmaking. We start with a bar soap, then you graduate to like a soft rubber mold, and we just carve, you know, little drawings in it. And then you graduate to linoleum cuts. I did them in high school. So I came back to it. I didn't do it consistently, but I came back to it, of course, when you're in college, and then after college, on my own, I was like, there's some things I love the medium, still want to do it. And so I wanted to do, you know, usually the conventional 11 by 14, 12 by 9, but I wanted to do something bigger. Now the challenge with this piece is that I didn't have a press that large. So it is hand pulled, so you literally rub it out with either wooden spoon or a burn that, I found a glass jar that has a top that fits my hand perfectly. So the underside of it is rubber, so I can hold it in my hand, and so it gives me an even, with the pressure, it gives me an even transfer of ink from the paper from my hand to the paper.
And so with, you know, and with pieces like Balance of Power, when I first saw this one, it's such a weighty title, and the title really, you know, I think a great title for an art piece really activates the artwork. It's like the image is there, but the title kind of bridges people to it.
Yeah.
And you know, in your works where you're, you know, sparking these conversations about valuing the work of women properly, and, you know, featuring, you know, women in a very particular way to you, what are some of the things you want people to see that, you know, they typically don't about, you know, even, you know, you as an artist,
Yeah.
but also, you know, just the work of women in the lives?
Because women are featured very prominently in my life. So my mother, of course, was the first woman and is the model of which I model myself after. So the way she raised us was top tier. She invested in her children, not just intellectually, but physically, in the foods that it was way before people had this vegan lifestyle or healthful whole foods. It was always that way in our home. My mother cooked our food. Even though we had nannies, she made our food. She still cooks every day. And it's always whole food. She grew, even in McLean, Virginia, she grew our food in the back. Tomatoes, cabbage, kale, sometimes corn, potatoes, wherever. And then she also has an awesome flower garden. Monstera that are like 35 feet high. The garden is it's so lush. So she as a model for me as a woman was my first model. My grandmothers, my aunts. So I want to depict that because I grew up in a female heavy family. My father had 8 sisters. My mom grew up in a male heavy family. She had 5 brothers. But there was balance in there. She was the kind of woman that was rough and tumble. So she was not a decorative person, just for decoration. She could make, she could do, she could cultivate. She still does all of those things. And so she was the one who actually advocated for me to go to art school. So coming from an African family, you usually are. My father was an economist, so doctor, lawyer, economist, engineer, and from when I was 3 years old, I was an artist. And so she campaigned for me. She was like, this child has always done this. So I want you even though she didn't understand what it was to be a professional artist, but she advocated, on my behalf
Wow.
to do that. So women featured very, very heavily. When I was in college, the way I earned money for my art supplies was braiding hair. And so braiding hair allowed me to meet women from every strata of society. The Delta flight attendants, the women that worked at IBM, the students that went to the AU Center, Georgia State, the Art Institute, Barter College, the girls that worked at the Macy's counter. So that, it's like a coven of women educated me about womanhood. So that's why women feature heavily in my work.
And I see some, specificness about who you met in their professions, and do you find some of those, stories working their way back into your work also?
They always do, because it was a treasure trove. It's like getting generations of women, from women in their 20s to women in their 80s, where you sit down and while you're braiding hair, and my braiding practice was different. It didn't exclude men. So my male friends would come and sit down. So they were allowed into a sacred space where women were, and the women were not. It was novel for them, and they enjoyed that they could exchange with men, and men could exchange with women without the hoopla, without all the facade, without the guard. We could exchange with each other. I also have one of my closest friends is Japanese, and she was born with nappy hair. I had never seen this before. And so she explained that about 15% of the population, she actually is Korean, and a lot of Koreans are born with coarse, curly, crinkly hair, but they wear wigs. And so she taught me, that the education I got from UB, the exchange that we had with, not just with she and I, but with everyone else that came into that braiding circle to sit with us. And she exchanged her culture and taught us about her meals, taught us about her family's migration from Korea to Japan, and the cultural, the way the Japanese were at the top, and the Koreans and Chinese and Southeast Asians were lower than them. And so how she hid her Korean heritage until she graduated, so they didn't know that she was Korean while she was going to school. Just things like that I learned that I could never have learned anywhere else.
Wow. That it's like it's so much that alludes to travel and worldliness in your life. Could you kind of point out some of the, like more specifically, like some of the symbols in your work that and connect them to a specific place? So like I see like the lizards here. Like what are you, like what places are you thinking about when you kind of take a look back at the work that are here?
Okay, so this particular piece is called Sunrise in Different Dimensions, and it's a title of a song by Sun Ra. Sun Ra was a jazz musician, and I think of him as like a thought leader. So his fascination was space, outer space, the planet Saturn. He said that he had, originally he was, I can't remember his original name, but he had been drafted into the army to go to war, and he refused to go. So he ended up being jailed. And when he came out, he remade himself into Sun Ra. And he said he was taken to Saturn and came back as an angel. And so in this piece, because of the materials, I found this piece of tin at a salvage yard, and I didn't know what it was going to be used for in the first place, but once I put it down, it looked like a sun. I used pyrography, which is burning into the wood. And so those represent the stars, the constellations. The lizards is an animal that when you cut the tail off, it can regrow the tail. So it's like a reanimation. So all of those things speak to his journey of Sun Ra. I'm fascinated by outer space, astronomy, the cosmology of the stars, the Dogon people, who not only identified the Sirius B, which was a star that wasn't available to the naked human eye. And when European astronomers happened to be in Mali at the time, and they wondered how did they know about this. Not only did they identify the star that they could not see until the telescope was made, probably in the 1970s, that could identify where that star was.
Mm-hmm.
They identified the ellipse of it, that it didn't just go around in a circle, it went into an ellipse. They charted that ellipse to 50 years, and then they created dances that imitate that reflect that. So outer space astronomy is a big motivator, a big inspiration for me.
Nice. Now, I want to kind of shift the conversation and make mention of Tamara Natalie Madden, good friend of yours. I actually had the privilege to interview her when I was like fresh out of college, working with Najee early on.
Yes.
And went to her apartment, saw the work that she was making, and saw some pieces in process, and had a great conversation with her, which should be on the website somewhere if you all want to kind of go back into the archive. But you sat for some of her paintings, and Tamara's piece is here. This woman with the feathered headdress holding the child to the front. But you sat and been amused for a number of her works. Could you and you also have some visual references, but could you talk a little bit about that experience, and also just Tamara as a person?
So I met Tamara maybe in the early 2000s. Her name is Tamara Natalie Madden. She was born in Jamaica. Part of her childhood was spent in Jamaica with her grandmother, and then she moved to the United States with her mother. She was an incredible woman, again. Worked as an artist, worked tirelessly, was not relegated to one particular medium. So she also was a printmaker. She would do, what is the one-time print that you can do, but it's never the same?
Monoprint.
Monoprints. She'd do a lot of those. She would draw a lot. She was a writer and a poet, a photographer, a painter. I'm pretty sure she would eventually become a sculptor. I'm pretty sure that she would eventually have dabbled in that. But when she committed to a medium, it was all the way. She had hundreds of paintings, drawings, writings, photographs. She would come over and we'd just be talking about her. I mean, the three of us it would just be an exchange. Sometimes she would go on shooting around the city with Maurice. She and I took a couple of road trips to Maryland, where we shared together. It was interesting to see our work was different, but that we would end up in the same collections. So you would think that it's completely different, but whoever purchased them would see how they could correlate to each other. She was fearless. She was driven. She was ambitious. She was a great educator. She loved her students. But what I loved about her as an artist was her commitment to the craft, and not just a commitment to each medium. So it wasn't just a one-off. Like, she'd have a whole series, dig all the way deep. She was a reader. There's a quote by Eleanor, what was her name? She was married to the president. Eleanor Franklin. Was that Roosevelt. Yes, Eleanor Roosevelt was one of her favorites. And, but yeah, she was brilliant. And it was my pleasure to have known her and spent time with her, and even being part of the process where she would come over, have an idea, we would do a photo shoot, and then she would crank out these incredible paintings from it.
Now, we had a guest stop by the other day who's he mentioned that he's working towards building a Jamaican cultural center in Atlanta, but he just he spent a lot of time with Tamara's piece, and he pointed out the Jamaican flag, the reference to the Taino Indian culture that was originally in Jamaica, and also the national bird as the hummingbird. And I know that, you know, Tamara used that as like a double entendre.
Yes.
Like for the national bird of Jamaica, but also to represent her sense of freedom and good health and being able to move around.
Yeah.
And so much came out of that piece to where you could really spend time with it and find, you know, many, many things about, you know, Jamaica, about Tamara's insight and her awareness of just different historical and cultural perspectives. But, you know, being a part of her creative process, what was that like, just kind of being a muse and being a sitter for her work? And did she kind of tell you the direction of the piece beforehand? Or?
No, she had, actually she had told me about what she wanted. And I know that she loves, you know, Black features, like the way Black people look. And so she had all types, and she always wanted to represent the theme of Jamaica, which is out of many one. So she always wanted to represent all of them. Because I'm also an artist and a photographer, so it was easy for us to. Part of photography is trust in the photographer, between the two. It's a chemical reaction. So sometimes you see someone beautiful and you're like, okay, let's do this thing, and they don't trust you, they don't know what to do, and so it doesn't come out. But because we knew each other, we are both immigrants, both women, Black women living in the United States. We know what that is to navigate and conform and transmute yourself into many different situations. So there's a deep level of trust, and I knew what she was trying to get, and we just played up with each other. So she didn't come in and say, Grace, I want you to look in this kind of way, that kind of way. I would just move, and she'd be like, right there, take that. And then she ended up doing a series of paintings off of that photo shoot.
I know you have some references. Would you mind kind of sharing a couple? And so these are some of the images of
So this
from
is
those resulting from
painting.
those sessions.
Yeah, this is a painting that she did. I was hospitalized in 2012, and people didn't know if I was going to make it. I was on a ventilator, and she was compelled to make this painting. And I think she called it Guardian of the City, something like that. And once I came out, I survived. I was thriving, and basically, I think a lot of it had to do with my community, my mother, my sisters, my grandparents, all the people who I've touched who prayed for me. After I came back, she brought it to the house, and it's a big painting. I was floored when I saw this, because it wasn't just I appreciate anyone who would take the time to draw somebody else in reference to them, but this painting it knocked me out. This is another one. I wish I had some of the photographs. I don't know what this one was called, but again, she had the hummingbird in it. So you can see from the, this one I actually have in my collection.
Can really see you in that one too.
I think this one is at Tuskegee. I think they bought it for their permanent collection. I think this was the first one she did from the series. My photographs. And she was something. Well, that was it.
So, this is actually the first time that BAIA has shown one of her works since, her passing. We thought, just having this show of works by women artists, it would be a great, opportunity to show her work. And also, thanks to Grace for, sharing your connection and, having a vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
And giving us insight about Tamara's, practice. She was a brilliant artist.
True.
I really enjoyed the times I got to, speak with her and instantly connected with her work when I first, saw it years ago.
And it's probably the passion with which she articulates that work.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I had I think I saw some of her pieces like a year before I actually met her, so I was already excited.
Yes,
To,
yeah.
you know, and the conversation just took it to the next level. So we want to make it, you know, more into a conversation too. So we'll kind of open the floor for questions. You know, since we're sitting in a round, I think this would be a great way to just kind of open it up a bit. Yes.
Sure. Which artist would you like to go with first? I have questions about.
Whatever you want to talk about.
So when I see this piece here and then the ones that you showed on the iPad, I see very Afro-futuristic, almost like she was looking into like the next years. You know, people's skin wasn't the present, but their clothing was the present, right? Like you saw the quilt on your iPad, the quilt, you know, she has the dress and everything. Can you speak about any of that with her thoughts, or do you know?
She had many themes that she worked with when it came to that. I know that she loved. You're talking about the quilts. She also collected fabric, and those quilts that you see in it are actual pieces of fabric that she has incorporated into the pieces. And I think that probably relates back to the heritage of your grandmother's quilt. And that is done all over the diaspora and the continent as well. I couldn't tell you what each one would be, or what each one would be about. But I knew that she did want she liked the universal theme of Jamaica, and that Jamaicans come in every shade, and she wanted to honor that as well.
Thank you.
I have a comment and then a question. The first comment I want to make is that it just dawned on me today, sitting here, that oftentimes when we look at works on a wall in a space like this, you see the beauty of it. But if you know an artist like, and for myself, I've known Grace Kisa for a long, long time now. So when I see Grace and I look at her work, because I know her as a person, I hear music. The music that she listens to when she works, the music that we listen to when I visit her home. And I just noticed that it's absent when I'm looking at the work, and it's like, this is weird, like why is it so quiet? Because when there's a house, it's always cranked up, and, you know, and the beauty of it is that the diversity of the music that she listens to, you cannot begin to imagine what probably was being played while some of these things were being created. So that's my comment. My question to you, Grace, is something I've never asked you personally, is that when you work in resin, what is this race of people that you created, and where does it come from? What informs their appearance?
The race of people. You know what? And the thing with race, it is a lot of times is put on. I think it comes from Americans because they live in a society where it's black or white. Is this black? Is this a black? Is this white? Like, I don't understand. And then how do I process it? Whereas in Africa, everything is us. So if I put a blue face on it, it's us. If I put a white face on it, you've seen the white masks that are all over the continent. There is also festivals. There's a Musiru festival. It's called Musiru in Mozambique. And they put a white paste on their faces, and they do their celebrations in there. So white does not mean Caucasian. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, Caucasian has nothing to do with Caucasian. The race has nothing to do with this. It is basically my experience and my expression of us, and it's not limited to one end of the color palette or one end of the spectrum. It's all of it. We use all of it. We are all of it. That's why. That's why I do it. Oh, that's why I do it. Yes.
Yes.
Grace, I wanted to know if anybody else in your family has this artistic gift.
They do. They do. I have an uncle who was a pianist. And then I have an uncle who I grew up with when he was in college. He lived with us, and his paintings of the Savannah landscapes, he would paint them and hang them on the wall. I never made the connection that I am going to be doing that. I never, but it was just around us. His name is Jackson, and he has 2 children that are also artists. On my father's side, I just met one of his great nephews, who's also an artist. My younger sister is a poet. She's a writer. She was an English major. But I am the first one to make a professional career at it, and we have a huge family, like in the hundreds. But I'm the first one. But Catherine, sorry, I have a sister who I grew up with, who's also an artist. She's 13 months younger than me. She lives in New York, and she's a painter, mixed media. She does mixed media assemblages. She's also a photographer, and a painter. So yeah, Catherine, she started out as a biology major, so she was going to go into genetics. And right after the MCAT, she came to Atlanta, and we started painting. And she was like, "This is what I'm going to do." Yeah, so she's an artist as well.
Thank you for your gift.
Yeah, I've got one. When I think about the longevity of the process of us creating, as creatives, and we see the success, or the people see the success when we have our shows, or this write-up, or this artist talk, or whatever. But in the midst, there's these various ebbs and flows that happen, and we're in the studio working in our practice. And I'm just curious, like when you think about your work and the longevity of this creative pursuit, what are some of the things that's important to you as you tackle a given piece or a given body of work? What's not necessarily how you're handling the material, but just conceptually, what are you hoping success is for the given work, or the given bodies of work? And then also I'm curious about just maybe 1 or 2 key tipping points that you feel that's taking place for your own personal practice over the time that you've maybe been here in Atlanta.
Okay, so the first question was.
Yeah, no, just like as you pursue the work, like what's what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? How are you gauging success with that? What makes a piece successful?
What makes a piece successful for me is when I look at it and I haven't seen anything like it before, and it makes me think. It makes me stop and think, or stop and question. What is that? And then I have to go in. It pulls me in. So that's what I want. I want the work to do. I don't care what. I don't draw it all out or plan it all out, because my process is improvisational. So sometimes in the middle of something, I will change, or I will stop when I get to a point of one, and I don't know what to do next. I will continue on something else. Sometimes what I'm doing on that on the second piece will inform the first piece, and I'll go back and finish it off. And then I work in series, so each time I work in that series, it's going to get better and better, and that's the idea, to make it stronger, to make it intriguing to me, to make it exciting visually or conceptually to someone, including me first. Even if people don't get it. Like, because it doesn't. Sometimes people don't get it, and then you bring it down to, okay, maybe I'll take this off, or maybe I'll not paint the faces white because they don't get it. They think it's. But I will explain it. I'm willing to explain it for you to get there. And if you don't, that's fine. But I'm willing to explain the work. I'm willing to challenge myself to not just stay complacent and let me just stay here because it's safe and it sells. Because there are so many other ideas that I have coming behind that need to be fleshed out. So I'm just going to make the thing and continue to make it, and then eventually I'll see the through line between those works.
And lastly, just a couple key milestones that you're really proud of.
Oh, okay.
And that you felt that were like tipping points for your own personal growth.
For my personal growth, the tipping point was when I decided to go from painting to sculpture. And I still paint. And Maurice always says to me, "You don't paint anymore." I still do paint. but the excitement I feel creating something in 3 dimensions is unparalleled. I'm always excited about what I'm gonna make next. And then there are ideas that are so big, you're like, I don't even know how I'm gonna do that, but let me just make a small version. And Maurice is always telling me, make it bigger, make it bigger. Now I'm ready to make it bigger. Because at first I was like, where am I gonna put all this? Because all my junk, that I keep in tubs and all that, now they float out into the room. So now where am I gonna? So I'm just gonna make them. Another what did you call it?
Tipping point.
Tipping point was last year when I got a letter from the European Cultural Center in Italy. And at first I thought it was a phishing email. Because I was like, it's not real, it's not real. And then I got it again. And they were inviting me to make a proposition to exhibit during their Biennale. And so I was like, okay, well, let me pull this together, and did the presentation. And at the end of the at first I thought I was presenting to one curator. They ended up being 2. And I was like, okay, I'm ready for this because I've already done the PowerPoint presentation. So did it, and at the end of the meeting, she said, we're going to go ahead and formally invite you. The email will be coming later, but you are going to be exhibiting with us in Venice.
I just want to say, I got a letter like that this year, and I didn't respond because I actually thought it was fishing. Yeah.
Because they are. I mean, we get so many sometimes, but the English in it was correct. The second time I read it, and I was like, let me go and see if they are on Instagram. So I went to their Instagram, went through their images, and I saw Shaniqua Gay, and I said, okay, this is legitimate. Shaniqua Gay is also a Black female artist based here in Atlanta, Georgia. Brilliant painter, conceptual. She does sculpture as well. And she showed with the European Cultural Center last year. So that's who I called when I was like, how do I even begin? Who, what, how do you get your pieces?
Yeah.
Because once you're in, they're like, here you go. Now it's up to you. Welcome. So the fees were nothing to sneeze at. And so I just started talking to people, talking to my collectors, talking to my patrons. This is what's happening. This is what I'm trying to do. And Shanuka gave me the number of a art consultant that really saved me. She gave me a timeline on how to get there. She managed the shipping companies, because the U.S. shipping companies, there's an Italian shipping company, and then the European Culture Center has a liaison that works with me on my booth, my presentation, when the pictures are due, when the images are due, when the text is due, and that's even before I've even created the work. So it was a big learning curve. It still is a big learning curve. I'm going to be going for the first time in April, so it's a whole learning process for that. But yeah, that's a tipping point for me.
I have,
You got another one?
yes. I watched your transition from being a photographer. When I first met you, you did this beautiful photography. Have you transitioned out of that completely?
I don't transition out of any of them.
Okay.
Any of them. And the photographs that you were talking about, I used to print my own in the darkroom. Nowadays, all the darkrooms are gone because you could pay a fee, an hourly fee, go in. I would use the enlarger. It was a meditative process. Go through the developer and all the processes to make the print. And I did that because Wolf Camera charged so much to have your work printed. And I was like, I can pay. I mean, I learned how to do it in art school, so we knew how to process photography. And then going into the darkroom, I mean, you have more control over what you want, how you want it, how big you want it. And yeah, that was, but then they closed all the darkrooms. But there is a darkroom at SCAD And I went on a tour recently, maybe last year. And when I walked in that dark room and smelled that divorce, the thing is, digital photography has got me hard. I mean, Maurice was like, I don't know what you're doing in the dark room, but you need to try this. Now the effects is digital, you see immediately what you have. I like both. I like the immediacy of what I see, and I can make the correction immediately and shoot again. I have not abandoned photography. I still do shoot. Yeah.
So yeah, we have a couple gifts we wanted to present to Grace before we conclude. But any concluding remarks, like where you can be found, or even projects that you have that are upcoming that people should be aware of.
Okay, so on the Beltline, on the West Side Trail, I have a sculpture commissioned by the Atlanta Beltline. So it is there, not far from Washington Library in the West End. I just last week finished a public art installation in Midtown Commons, Peachtree Place and Peachtree. And then you can find me on Instagram, gracekisa.com, Facebook, Art by Grace Kisa, here in Atlanta.
Are you going to present the?
Wow.
So on behalf of us here at Black Art in America, we just wanted to say thank you, and we honor and celebrate you.
Thank you.
The floral arrangements by my cousin Teresa, who manages the gift shop, and she's one of the artists that we have in there as well. Beautiful arrangement, and we got Teresa's here, some items too.
Yesterday.
I'll hold it for the hug. So, thank you all. I say, take some time and enjoy the show. Grace has work here in the show as well as in the gift shop area in our print bins. And, and Grace is here. If some of you have questions, I'm sure she wouldn't mind taking a moment to, have a quick conversation. And thank you all for coming to BAIA. And Chris,
I just want to add one other thing in the spirit of being in this gallery space today. When you see an artist whose work you like, invest in it. I don't care if they're in art school, I don't care how young they are, what they look like. Invest in it, because you never know whose work you're buying that day. I've known Grace and Maurice for so long. And who knew that the work that I was supporting then, because I liked the way it looked aesthetically, and now look at who they've become. So to support artists, it's so important. These people, they work hard. It comes from their heart and soul. This is all they have. And everybody doesn't get it. So if you get it, support them. And thank you, Najee, for putting this space here to further that conversation. Because it's so important. A lot of people think they don't even support their family members who want to be artists. Like, you can't make money doing that. That's a lie. Artists are very special people. It's a gift from God and from the gods. And it's not to be taken lightly. I know it's a business side of it, but it's an innate gift that people, if you're ever around a real creative, they never stop doing it. You listen to their conversation, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Anybody in this room, like a great example, I'm just gonna call him out, he's not here, but like Fabian Williams, whom I love dearly. You talk to Fabian, you give that brother 30 minutes, and man, you are clear and outer space. And I love it. I love it. And for people like ourselves who are all here, we have to support our creative communities. So when one of us goes off into outer space, it's important you stand there and engage them in this conversation, because they don't have another space to have that conversation where they feel safe to talk about that.
Yes.
So enjoy the conversation, invest in their art, and encourage people to keep going and keep dreaming. And thank you, Najee.
If you could just mention the upcoming show next month.
Yes. So we're getting ready for a huge show next month. The show is titled Landscapes for Richard Mayhew. So Richard Mayhew, legendary, renowned landscape painter, Semi-abstractionist. We're having a show honoring his 100, the anniversary of his 100th birthday next month. So Richard Mayhew is 99 years old now, still an active artist, painter. He still travels, takes sketchbooks with him, take his watercolor set with him, and he's still working and has been, a contributor and an observer at pretty much every major American art movement. And he's still with us here today. And we're honoring him next month with a showing of contemporary landscape paintings from over about a dozen artists that are active today, and even some of his peers. So so come out and see us next month. The show will open on April 4th, and the reception will be on April 6th.
Thank y'all.